It's Terry with Terry's Tidbits, and I'm a little bit slow getting this video processed and uploaded for you, but this is the Advanced Study Group meeting from this last Wednesday. We hit topics this week of the lookup relationships, as well as auditing what's happening within our orgs. So take a listen to this, and good luck as you continue studying for this exam. All right, everyone, this is Terry and Carla with the Des Moines, Iowa user group, and we are getting ready to do the advanced admin study groups on extending custom objects and I believe applications, and then auditing and monitoring. Then if we have time here at the end, we'll do some Q&A. And I believe, Jude, you are up as our first presenter. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Yes.
And I will let you go ahead and share.
Let me see if my screen sharing works. All right. The proverbial. Can you see it? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it looks good.
All right. Extending custom objects and applications. This is really a scenario-based, from what it seemed like to me for all the study guides and exam questions. So I'll run through it quickly. It's mostly about relationships of those custom objects. So I broke down the relationships into a few different sections. Lookup relationships. So you can obviously have the one-to-many. And we can have a unique one called hierarchical. External object relationships, external and indirect, and we'll talk about these later. We'll go into detail. Master detail with parent and child, and many-to-many. If you guys are familiar with Osho and his clan. So the standard lookup, we're all really familiar with it. Can be one-to-one, can be one-to-many. They're not dependent on each other. They can exist independently. Related lists, we're familiar with it. One thing you may not be familiar is you can link to the same objects. It's called the self relationship. You obviously can't link to the same record, but you can link to the same object. Hierarchical is a little different. It's on the user record. It's on the user object. It offers you a new or a separate way to track managers, or if they're on teams, you can track team leaders or user hierarchy. Lots of different ways you can use it. Externally, so now we're talking about if there's any objects we have set up as an external object. This gets a little bit more confusing, so hopefully I can explain it very well. So when the parent object is when the external object is a parent object, we want to look at the external lookup rather than the indirect lookup. The child object can be a standard custom or external object as well, but the parent is usually, I think it's required that it should be an external object just by the way it's structured. So what it does is it matches the parent ID on the external object to a lookup value on the child record. An example would be the product catalog in the data warehouse or any external source has a unique ID, and we have it set up as an external object in Salesforce. And then cases are linked to the products through the external lookup field in the case object. So the case has custom lookup field. That's an external lookup field that holds the product ID. So we're not using the Salesforce ID necessarily. It's linking up on that external ID. The indirect lookup, I think, is used a little less common, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but I'm fairly certain. So this is when the external data does not include any Salesforce ID or any indicators. So what we do is we take the unique custom external ID field, and then we link it to that external object. So an example would be account record shows related list of external orders. The orders use the customer ID field to match, with the account customer ID field being the external ID field. Does that make sense? Questions? We'll see in the scenarios later how it comes together. Be careful. There's no lookup filters on external relationship fields. And you cannot search. So when you pull out, get in the little ID and it comes up with the little lookup search. They don't work on external fields unless you're using the cross-org adapter for Salesforce Connect. And that is in gold with money signs on, because if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. It's expensive. Indirect lookups can only be created on external objects that have a custom field with the external ID and unique attributes selected. So if you're familiar with that, when you create that field and you use those attributes, that's what dictates when you can use that indirect lookup without using Salesforce IDs. Reporting. So there's a lot of, on these relationships, there's a lot of different ancillary things that we're not really going to get into, just being that I feel like the study group should be really scenario based upon these relationships. A lot of things, security, visibility, and reporting. But I do point out reporting in these because I think it's valuable. So when you create a lookup relationship, either external or just a standard lookup, it comes with a few standard reports that pop up, and you probably are all familiar with them. So we get the object by itself, we get cases, we get the object with the first lookup, object with the second lookup, object with a third lookup. And you can see in some scenarios, there's additional ones that come with it, but this is the general standard that comes with a standard lookup. Custom reporting is unique because I see a lot of scenarios where people don't leverage this as much as it could be leveraged, I feel, where you can go into your custom report type and you can add more data from the lookup record that you're looking up to. So we've combined the leads and accounts. Now you can go into accounts and follow through with a bunch of their fields and some of their lookup fields as well. So it's a super powerful tool if you want to get your reporting down and be useful to that end user. Good old master detail relationship. It obviously links two objects together with security and deletion dependent on the parent object. It's one to many. We get the roll-up fields with it. So this is the only opportunity we get to use roll-up fields in a master detail relationship. The detail and any sub-detail records inherit security and permissions, and they cannot be a standard object. So what happens if we have a lookup and we want to convert it to a master detail or vice versa? There's a little tricks that you have to follow. If you want to convert a master detail to a standard lookup, you can do it if there's 0 roll-up fields on that master record. Want to change it from a lookup to a master detail, you can do it if the lookup field that you're wanting to convert has a value in all of the records, not just the record that you're on or the record that you're working with. It has to have a value in all of the records that field is on. And also, when you convert, check your reports, because sometimes it screws up if you're working with the standard reports it gives you, can mess those up. On the considerations page in Salesforce Help, it has a really good little box here, a little breakdown of what reporting capabilities you have with the different relationship types. I found it very useful. If we can get back to it. So in a master detail, you get the master object by itself, of course. You get master with the detail. You get detail object in first lookup, second lookup, third lookup. And that's just standard reporting. On those custom reports, you can combine those with many, 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 many other scenarios. The many-to-many relationships. This is where it gets a little confusing for some, and it's a love-hate relationship with the junction object. I hate it. I'm looking for smile. There we go. There's smiles. And I'll explain. I hate it because I've been in many scenarios where Salesforce admins or people in the Salesforce ecosystem use Salesforce like a developer, and they say, let's just create another table, let's just create another object, and we'll use a junction object. That's great if you know how to use a junction object, and I find a lot of end users don't know how to use and report off of junction objects. So although very powerful, I don't think it's the best opportunity for end users. So a lot of the times I'll challenge myself to amend the data model rather than to just create another junction object. but although there are times where it's very helpful and extremely powerful. So the master detail relationships are created on this junction object. There's 2 of them on the junction object that relate back to the detail records. We get the related lists on the master records. Permissions are determined by the users on both of the master records. So that gets a little confusing as well. You got to take the both master records into consideration when you're thinking on who's going to look, create, read, edit, delete, report on that junction object. And the order, this gets confusing too, and I learned this the hard way. The order you create your master detail relationships is important. The first one you put on that junction object becomes the primary, and it inherits cool things like the color and the icon, but it also inherits the record owner from the first master detail, and divisions, data divisions if you use them, and it inherits that as well. Obviously, the second one becomes secondary, which becomes the primary if it's deleted. And also, any formulas and validation rules you can put on that junction object can pull from both masters. So that's a really powerful opportunity for you to use. And on your many-to-many relationships, you get some pretty good reporting as well. Obviously, the master object by itself, secondary master object by itself, the primary with the junction and the secondary, or the secondary with the junction and the master. This is where I think it gets confusing for a lot of end users because they don't understand what report they should be pulling to get the information they should be getting. So any training or any report naming that could help in that relationship is super helpful to me. Now the best part, we have 6 scenarios, and I don't know, I'll call on you guys, I think. He's getting nervous. All right, I'm going to give you a scenario and you tell me what kind of relationship or how we could solve that problem. Sales would like to associate leads into segments or groups. They want to track segments or groups on a lead. So you set up a group record type on the account object. How can you relate the 2 objects so that sales can see what leads are in each group when you're on the account page? Matt?
You could do a lookup to group on the lead object.
Bingo. Lookup. Why a lookup? Anyone? Don't be shy. You know it. Trust your instincts.
Because you want to see
Standard object.
you want to see the related list.
Mm-hmm. Why not a master detail?
Because once one is deleted, then the other is.
Account's a standard object.
There we go. You can't do a master detail. Leads are funny. Store accounts. Scenario 2. HR would love to be able to track what teams the employees are on and leading to get better insight into quarterly and yearly performance reviews. How would they be able to report on what internal teams the employee is just the team lead? How about Patrick? We skipped past it really quickly.
Thinking on that.
Anyone?
Hierarchical.
Yeah. Hierarchy. Because it's on the user record, and we can create a new field on the user record that says this is he's a team lead on team X, Y, or Z. Scenario 3, we store all of our insurance policy data in our data warehouse. We do not want to duplicate that data in Salesforce, but we would like to associate customer policies with the contacts in Salesforce. How could we do this? Scott.
I thought it was the indirect external ID. Maybe I'm getting
Close.
close.
External, but why? Whoops.
Because you have that in the in the data warehouse, and that's external. You want to have it out. You don't want to have that inside Salesforce.
Yes, but and this is the struggle I had with this. It's hard to relate it. Where am I going here? The key here, I think the easiest way to get this is when parent is the external object, it's an external lookup. So if your child is the object that's inside Salesforce, and you create an external object that is the parent, then you're using that standard external lookup, because that parent object, you're relating that Salesforce ID of that external object to the child. Does that make sense? So for the indirect lookup, it's when we are not using that Salesforce ID, and usually when the external object is a child. There are other circumstances where that's not the case, but that's really the easiest way that I've found to keep those straight. Scenario 4. Right now we track expenses and link them to an account, but it seems the expense record owner is always the account record owner. How can we change it so that the expenses could have different owners than the account they are associated with? Anyone?
Can you do a
I would
lookup?
like to give it a try. Oh,
Yes, go ahead.
Oh,
of
sorry.
course.
no, it's okay. I was thinking to change it into a lookup from master detail, but you have to make sure that you back up the data. Number one. Number two, you also have to make sure there's a relationship between the records.
Perfect. Convert it. There's also one more caveat. If you want to convert to a master detail to a lookup, make sure there's no roll-ups. So on the account record, there can't be any roll-up fields that say there's 10 expenses for this account or whatever that is. Scenario 5, we use custom objects to track our machines and their related parts. Currently, we use a lookup between the two objects, but how can we delete all the parts if the machine is deleted?
You could make it into a master detail, making sure that that field is filled out, that the lookout field is filled out for all of them.
Bingo, it's too easy. It's too easy. All right, Workday tracks the dependents, and we would like to be able to link those dependents to an associate custom object in Salesforce. I want to make sure that each associate can be linked to multiple dependents. I'll answer this one.
Junction?
It's that indirect. Why?
Indirect.
Because the child is the external object. The dependent is the child. Questions? Concerns? Silence is good, I think.
I think you did well.
It means
I did have
something
one.
right.
I did
Yeah, go
have
ahead.
one comment about the junction objects. As long as you can keep the junction object as a functional object and not treat it as a quote unquote junction object, if you can integrate it as part of the process, the work process, then it's a little bit easier for the users to be able to use it.
Yes, I would agree. And I also would agree that I should have hesitated a little bit by saying I hate the junction object. I hate it when it's misused because we use it quite a bit and it's an extremely powerful object. Like we leverage a lot of pick list and responsibilities and permissions off of that junction object. So, which even dictates a lot of like code working in the background on a lot of different other things. So we use it quite heavily. It just, like you said, you need to be really careful, I think, for the end user to make it clear to them that what it is and how it works.
Speak from experience with that.
Yeah.
Good. Very good. Well done. Any other questions on that particular topic?
Thank you all.
All right, well done. Auditing and monitoring. Kumar, I think I had you on that.
Mhm. Yep. Let me try to share my screen. Okay. So let me know when you guys can see it.
You're good.
Let me minimize some. I'll bring it on another page. Is it? Oh, there you go. So auditing and monitoring, it's going to take 6% of the advanced administrator certification exam. And our intent here is to set up some tools to help us monitor what's going on with our Salesforce org and get into as much detail as possible if there is any issue. Basically, we are going to put our detective hats on and try to identify any abnormality. All right, I'm just mumbling up. But yeah, if there's anything going irregular, we want to get to the bottom of it. So we'll start with event monitoring. So event monitoring is one of many tools that Salesforce provides us to keep our data secure. It lets us see the granular details of user activity in our organization. And as a part of event monitoring, there are more than 50 event types. And these are events like logins, logouts, if someone clicked the link, or if there's any API call, all of these are event types and something that you can report on. All of these events are stored as an event log file, and these event log files can be viewed 24 hours after an event occurs. And for how many like number of hours or days it can be, the retention policies on this depends upon the org, the Salesforce edition that you have. Event monitoring is an API only feature, and all the events are stored in the API standard object called event log file. And based on the edition, like if you're working on a developer edition, you have access to all the log types free of cost. And those are those have a retention period of 1 day. If you have enterprise, unlimited, or performance edition, you have free access to things like insecure external assets, which is like an image or video that's hosted on insecure HTTP page or something like that. And you also get free access to login and logout events. And all of these by default has a 1 day retention period, but if you pay extra, you can get up to 30 days of retention for all the file types. So some of the use cases where you can leverage event log files is if you're trying to monitor some suspicious logins, like in this graph, you can see that on May 4th towards the evening, there was a lot of login activity, so which looks abnormal. So then you can go into the details like which user logged in, how many number of times, something like that. You can also monitor suspicious activities like a full report downloads, or let's say you brought in a new feature and you want to see how many people interacted with it, then it can help you with monitoring their adoption rate with your users. And it can also help you understanding if your report you created, is it performing well, if it's taking too much of CPU time, something like that. So now that we know what we can do with these event log files, how do we access it? So there are multiple ways to do it. First of all, the easiest one would be to use your developer console. And so event log file is just like any other object. So you can run a SQL query and get your event log files. Here is a quick example. Like I just did a SQL query on like ID created date and just log file, and it gave me an API link to that. And then I used a Workbench to fetch that event log file. When you do that, you get a CSV. You can copy it, paste it in a spreadsheet or any other tool of your choice. Another way is to use Salesforce's own event log file browser, which is a Salesforce connected app. And all the links I have given in the notes. So when you open this presentation, you'll find all these links on your notes if you are more curious about it. So the way it works is it gives you an option to download a CSV or curl file, and you have various, you have various you have date range. You can select the event types that you are curious about, or you can just select them all, and then you can hit apply, and it gives you all the event log files. And then how you can use it is, let's say in our case, we use spreadsheet, then you get the user, like if you're trying to monitor a specific event log instance, then you can find a user ID, and you can also get the URI of the report that was ran. One outlying case with this is when I try to run it, it didn't give me a URI for the report. The reason is I didn't save that report. I just exported the details, and that's one of the limitation of it. It just gave me 0, 0, and O, and no other strings after that. So there is an idea on the IDEA platform of Salesforce outstanding, highlighting this issue. And a Salesforce rep, she suggested to use real-time event monitoring in these cases. And I have added a link in the notes if you want to learn more about it. If you are more into programming, you can also use any other programming languages. So for example, for Python, again, links in the note. You can use it to get the data that you want to look into. There are some out-of-the-box solutions, though, that you may want to look into when working with these when trying to monitor these events. One straightforward is directly from Salesforce. It comes with Shield platform, but I think you can also get it separately, the event monitoring app. Then if you have Splunk, Splunk has Splunk app for Salesforce and also Splunk add-ons. Fair Warning is built, I think, from ground up on Salesforce. It's available on App Exchange. So, and you also have you can also leverage New Relic Insights for monitoring these event files. Like some of them also extend the functionality. For example, here in Fair Warning, you get it can store data beyond 30 days, which is not something that comes directly with Salesforce's event log system. So if we look more into detail of the event monitoring analytics app, it's built on Tableau CRM now. Earlier it was Einstein Analytics, part of their whole name change thing. And this is just a screenshot of a random report that I got from Trailhead. It shows you who logged in the most and other important information. So what it does is it pulls data from Salesforce event logs, and it provides a dashboard for you. All you have to do is just load the data, and then it will do all the hard work. You don't have to configure. You have to do minor configuration, but not much. It can help you answer questions like the top reports that have been downloaded and if there's any trends that we need to be concerned about, if who's the person who downloaded most report, or if there is a report performance problem. For example, in this case, like as you look into the Trailhead module, it's pretty informative, and it has some hands-on that you can use to learn more about it. Like in this case, the first report gives you the report trends by a user, and you can see that Bob Bandit has very high number of report downloads. And then you can also drill down and see, all right, what are the reports that he's looking into? And you can get to the bottom of it. So when you start this reporting engine, you have to feed data to it. So the first time you did it, or when you start doing it in Salesforce, you use manual data loads. But you can also set up a daily workflow or data flow that runs every day. And it's recommended that you schedule it at around 8 a.m. because Salesforce does a refresh at around 3 a.m. local time of the Salesforce instance. There are also event-based data refresh options available. To check the report performance, you can also set up some dashboards to monitor that. So the report performance area, in this case, shows you the database total time versus the CPU total time. And if you are concerned about it, you can set up notifications. If the numbers are getting higher, you can trigger it to send you an email saying that, hey, there is an issue with the report performance. And I really like the Trailhead content on this. And like on the last page of this whole module, they have demonstrated another report where they used user-wise account clicks, like how many users clicked on how many account records, and then that can help you find out if there is any abnormal things going on with your organization, Salesforce organization. So as said earlier, event monitoring is a part of Salesforce Shield platform. So it comes with, along with the platform encryption and field audit trail, Shield also comes with event monitoring. And it allows you to do all that I showed to you in the last couple of slides. So there are some questions, but I think to respect everybody's time, let's come back to it if we have more time in the end. So let's move on to debug logs. And if we have time, we'll come back to these questions. So for debug logs, you all might have used debug logs to a certain extent, like either in developer console while debugging any issues, or just setting up debug logs or trace flags for other users. So a debug log can record database operations, system processes, and errors that occur when executing a transaction or running a unit test. It can contain information about database changes, any HTTP callouts. If there's any Apex errors, it also lists the resources used, and it also logs information about automated workflow processes. So a typical debug log looks like this, where it has header on the top, which includes information like API version and log levels. And then you have the execution unit, which starts with the execution started tag up top and then ends with the execution finished tag. Then there's code unit, which is a discrete unit of code, be it a class or a trigger or any web service. And like the execution unit, it starts with code unit started and ends with code unit finished. There's also log lines, which includes the timestamp and also the event types and the details. Then there's some additional log data helping you with the limit that we talked about in the previous slides. So if we look into log lines a little further, you have the timestamp on, it starts with a timestamp and the elapsed time, then you have the event and you have the event details. And if you are interested in learning more about how to use Log Inspector to drill down into your logs, or how to use Perspective Manager, there's a link to this on this slide that you can use. To keep this presentation shorter, I think I'm going to skip this for now. So working with debug logs, you do need to be aware of that there are some limits that you'll be working with. So a debug log must be 20 megabytes or smaller. Anything bigger than that, it trims out all the older information. A system debug log is retained for 24 hours. So these are the logs that are generated from developer console. For example, when you're running a class, the debug log that gets created there, it has a short lifespan of 24 hours. Whereas if you have set up trace flags, the monitoring debug logs, those are retained for around 7 days, for 7 days. And if you have generated more than 1,000 megabytes of debug logs in a 15-minute window, your trace flags are disabled. And if your org accumulates more than 1,000 megabytes of debug logs, users are prevented in the org from adding more trace flags. Moving on to the first question that we'll be looking into. A debug log, does it or does it not include information from action triggered by time-based workflows? I'll let you guys think it through, and if anybody want to answer, please go ahead. If not, the answer is a debug log does not include information from actions triggered by time-based workflows. So how do we set up a debug logging? So there are multiple ways. One, you can do it via developer console, or you can go to setup and then search for debug log, and it will give you an option to select or to create a new trace flag. A new trace flag includes debug level. It includes the start time of start and end time, and also the log type. So when setting up these debug levels, we have 5 options to select from for the traced entity type. You can either trace an automated process, for example, processes that are running in background like emailing, chat invitations, etc. It can also include platform integration user, like if there is any integration process running in the background, you can have audit information on that. And then you can set up debug log for a specific user, or you can just set up debug logs for trace flags for class and trigger. You do have to know that note that when you are setting up a trace flag for Apex class or an Apex trigger, it acts like an additional layer where you're specifying more information that, hey, I want to look into the debugs little finer. But unless you have set up a user trace flag, it does not actually log the data. So we talked about log levels a little bit. So log levels basically tell you how much detailed your logs need to be. So if you're saying none, then it's pretty minimal with only the important information, I guess. And then as you enter more details like error, it will give you error details, warn, info, debug, find, finer, finest, and so on. And as you go from the green area to the red one, the debug logs get heavier. And the debug logs are cumulative. So if you are doing fine, then it will include everything. It will also include the debug lines. It will also include the info, warning, and other lines as well.
Hey, Kumar, about 5 more minutes. If I'm not sure how much more you have, but just
yeah,
kind of watching the time.
All right. Yeah, I don't think it should take much more time.
All right.
Yeah, I'll try to wrap this up quick. So you can also set up, when we talked about classes and triggers, setting up debug logs. So when you set up a debug log for a class, and then that class calls another class, like in this example, from class 1, it's calling class 3, then it inherits the level of debug information from its class. So if class 1 was finest, and so it will just take whatever it is there for the class which calls this class. So another question, like what is permission needed to view, retain, and delete debug logs? Anyone? So to view, retain, and delete debug logs, you need the permission to view all data. And then something we went through in the last couple of slides, if a class and trigger trace flags have been set up, but logging is not enabled for a user, will there be a logging? As we talked about in the last slide, setting up class level or trigger level debugging, it's just there to elevate the level to which you can capture the debug data. It does not necessarily force it to log the debug information. Can you set up debug logs for guest users? Yes, you can. And for more information, you can click on the link to get more information. The last part of it is setting up audit trail. So audit trail helps you track the recent setup changes that you or any other admins have made to the Salesforce organization. Like you created a new object, you added new fields. All of that information is saved in the setup audit trail feature in Salesforce. And you can download up to 180 days of setup history. And after 180 days, the setup entity records are deleted. The list, when you go to this page, the list shows you 20 most recent changes with information like date of change, who made the change, what the change was. And as said, after 180 days, all of those would get deleted. So second last question of the day, if an admin logged in as another user and made some changes, whose name would be listed in the setup audit trail? Would it be the user who he logged in with, or the admin who did the change?
I think it'd be the admin who did the change.
Yes. So it will actually you're correct. It will use the admin's information in the audit trail. And again, the permission needed to view audit trail history, it is view setup and configuration information. Yep, that's it. This is all I had, unless there's any questions.
Excellent. Well done. You are you a developer just by chance?
I do both.
You do both, yeah. I wondered. That was, you took it in a different direction than what I was thinking it, but it was interesting. Interesting concept, so that you had to share that I hadn't thought about in a long time, especially on some of those the audit event aspects of that. That's really good information to at least have a cursory level of knowledge about. So well done, well done.
Thank you.
And we are going to, I think, do a little bit of Q&A. Carla's going to take us through that, and this will cover topics to date. So yeah, go ahead and share, Carla, and I'll let you kind of take it from here. And you can call on people or do however you want to do it.
Okay.
I love your background, by the way.
It's an older picture. She's looking so much more older these days.
I imagine. The big sister.
Yes, she is a big sister. Okay, so I have some big, I'm going to call on people. I think that's easiest. So be prepared. Visibility to records can be controlled by which of the following: record types, account team, validation rule, field level security, sharing rule. And it's 2 answers. I'm going to reduce my screen. If it's too small, let me know, but I wanted to try to get it all on one page. Boone, do you know the answer to this?
Sorry, I had to unmute. So I saw sharing rules down there. And what else was there anything below sharing rules? I can't remember.
No,
just note for review. Okay.
Yeah.
Record types, account team, validation rule, and field security. Record types.
Let's see what it says. No.
Account
team, yes. So we can click into that, but so record types wouldn't be there because in and of themselves, they're not used to control visibility. So account team can be used to control visibility. Anybody else want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's a form of sharing. I should have picked that up. It's a form of the sharing rule, so that should have made the flag there.
Yep, good call out there.
Carla, this is George. I agree, but that is a tricky question because you can control with the record type what the viewer, what pick list values they have, for example, or what they see. So,
but the question, I don't know if I can go back. I don't think I can.
Yeah,
but it said it was visibility to records. So record in and of itself as a whole, and not just pieces of the record.
Thank you so much. It's very helpful.
Yep.
And those it can be little details like that can make the right or wrong answer. So you definitely have to read them carefully.
Yes. Universal Containers HR department wants to have a way for employees to confidentially report inappropriate behavior. Because of the sensitivity of these records, only the employee filing and HR staff are allowed to see them. As the admin, which of the following prevents an employee's manager from seeing records submitted by their staff? Tanner, what do you think? We got remove the manager from the employee's user record, uncheck the grant access using hierarchies, use sharing rules to limit the manager's access, use a sharing override, set the OWD on the object to private.
I would probably go to the B, uncheck the grant access using hierarchies, and cross my fingers.
That is correct, yes. Anybody have questions on that? Okay, I'm just gonna go next. CloudKicks had 2 custom objects in a master detail relationship. The detail object was accidentally deleted and quickly restored. What would be a consequence of this incident? Algie, are you there? Haven't heard from you today. What do you think about this one?
Yeah. Can I read the question once more?
Yes, yes. CloudKix has 2 custom objects in master detail. The detail object was accidentally deleted and quickly restored. What's the consequence? The relationship field would be restored to its original state. The relationship would be restored, but as a lookup field. The relationship field would be permanent deleted. The relationship field would switch to a text field with the ID of its master.
The relationship field would be restored to its original state.
This one, A?
Yeah.
The relationship would be restored, but as a lookup field.
Sorry, Algie, I should have taught you that today. That's my bad.
Did anybody know the answer to that? I'm just curious.
Of course I did.
Of course, right. Yes, yes. Right.
So here's a question with respect to that: is it changing the dynamic between the objects, or is it just changing it for? And I guess the clarification would be the detail object was deleted, so the entire object, not just the record, detail record, the entire detail object was deleted.
Object was deleted.
Yeah. And I didn't know that before my class. But I should have taught you that.
No,
Good question.
I think there's another implication too when you delete the object. I think the API name changes with the DEL after it.
Yes, that's true.
Well, because that could affect if you have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good call out there.
But A would be correct if it was just the record. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Not the entire object, just the record. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that's a good point. How would you, because you can restore the detail object, but that doesn't automatically restore the data in it, or does it? I don't think it does.
No, your data should come back with that.
The data would come back. You don't have to do a manual reload. I have to check that one out. But I do know that the API name changes.
Yes, it does change. That's a tricky question. Universal Container is implementing territory management. The VP of Sales has created a Northern and Southern California territory. They are children to the California territory. When setting up territory assignment rules, which of the following is true? Patrick, you want to take a stab at this one? The parent territory can inherit both children's assignment rules. Assignment rules cannot be inherited. The child territories can inherit the parent's assignment rules, or the parent and child territories can inherit each other's assignment rules.
You're killing me. I was just like, oh, I don't know this one.
I knew that somehow. I'm just kidding. Just take a stab at it.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Let's go with A.
Parent territory can inherit both. No.
Dang it.
The child territories can inherit the parent's assignment rules.
So the scenario there would be, let's say that you've got a California territory that's set up where your assignment rule is state equals California. Your 2 children might be set up with a assignment rule that is maybe based off of zip code or based off of the city name. You don't have to then specify for those children that it's California, because they're already inheriting the California aspect of that assignment rule just by being a child of that parent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Kind of.
All right, CloudKix would like to make their knowledge base publicly available on their customer community. What setting allows this? Who do we got here? Andrew, what do you think about this one? Grant read access in OWD, allow anonymous access, sharing rules, enable knowledge topics. It's one answer.
It's E, the last one.
What was that?
I think it's E, the last one.
E, okay. That is correct. Knowledge topics. Access to Trail Master Outdoors customer community. Oofda, that's a mouthful. Is granted to members of their loyalty program. The program allows family members access as well. All members of the family are listed as contacts under the same account and should be allowed visibility to support cases created by other family members. Which sharing method supports this capability? Meredith, what do you think? A, case teams, B, account teams, C, sharing rules, D, sharing sets, E, public groups.
Can I read it, the question one more time?
Yep.
I'm kind of a good slow reader, so.
Oh, you're good. Yep.
Me too. That's why it takes me all
Right?
the entire
Like,
amount of time to take
never
these
win
exams.
Jeopardy ever.
Right.
You're good.
I'm just trying to visualize this. Access to this
Yep.
customer. Oh, it's communities. That's why I can't visualize it.
Yeah.
I've never used communities. Rebecca.
So process of elimination here.
Yep.
You've got a family, so they're contacts within an account. And you want to give them the ability to see all of the cases, regardless of which family member created that. So when you think about a case team,
Oh,
does a case team do that?
no.
No. What about a count team?
No.
Okay. Can a sharing role do that?
Yes.
Okay. What about a sharing set?
I don't know what a sharing set is.
Okay. What's the last one?
Public
group.
So I would say sharing rules.
Okay. So here's what I want you to think about on the sharing role is what can you grant access to with using a sharing role?
Records.
Yep, it's granting access to records, but by what? So
Criteria.
you could do it by criteria.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you could do it by role or hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got multiple, if you've got 1,000 people in your community, would a sharing role be the way to do this?
No, it sounds pretty tedious.
Yeah. So it's going to be the one that you didn't know what was.
Yep.
It's a sharing set. Yeah.
I always think of sharing sets is only for community sharing. Yeah. So if you see sharing sets and on a community question, I'm not going to say it's the answer, obviously, all the time, but sharing sets are for the sharing functionality within the community. So, just keep that in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. What it does is it takes, well, and if you're not familiar with how a community, it creates a user record for them from their contact record.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, in essence, navigate up to their contact object and look to see what account that contact is associated with. And as long as the account ID is the same as the account ID on the case, it grants the access.
Okay.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
So it's an attribute of the contact as well as an attribute of the object you're sharing that are equaling.